This week, the People's Republic of China commemorated 70 years of communist rule. Meanwhile, violence in Hong Kong escalated when a teen was shot as protests there continue for a 17th straight week. What has 7 decades of communism done for the people of China? Joining me now with analysis of this and much more, and the push to impeach the president, is former presidential speechwriter and Wall Street Journal columnist, Bill McGurn. Bill, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Raymond.
I want to start with the protests in Hong Kong. You lived there for many years. These have been going on since June 9th, and until this week, no one had been fired upon. But now that this teenage boy has been shot, thank God he's in stable condition, the protests seem to have escalated. Could we see an acceleration of force by the police?
Well, we could. October 1st was the big date that everyone was worried about because it is the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, and that doesn't go down well in Hong Kong. So people knew there'd be a lot of protests that day. The problem now is this is all totally unnecessary. It's just been a giant botch by the government in Hong Kong and the government in Beijing. And they could have ended it peacefully earlier if China and Hong Kong, the governments, had been capable of a dramatic gesture of humility, saying, we got this wrong, we hear you, and we're not going to do it. Instead, everything they've done has been grudging and arrogant. And people now, you know, when I was there, we loved the police. The police was were peaceful, very good. Now people wonder, is it being run by goons? So the danger now is that more people who are protesting are saying the only answer is violence. That's one of the dangers going that way. It's a small minority of people. And one of the bad things is that because of the violence, a lot of the families that would be out there protesting too don't come out because they don't want their kids hurt. So the bottom line is I don't see a good end to this because I don't think China's capable of doing what needs to be done. And I'm wondering, even if they did at this point, whether that would be enough to quell the disturbances.
Right. Well, the extradition bill that ignited the protests, that's been withdrawn. And the demonstrators have really, they've moved their demands. They want the Hong Kong chief executive, Carrie Lam's resignation. They want an investigation into police brutality. And they want the release of demonstrators and more democratic freedoms. Is this turning into a renewed democracy movement? Or and should the administration be doing something here, Bill?
Yeah, look, look, it's more or less been a democracy movement from the beginning. When I lived in Hong Kong, the agreement between China and Britain, the implicit assumption was China's going to get Hong Kong from the Brits, but Hong Kong is going to get democracy. And in those years, since this thing was inked in 1984, and especially since China took over in 1997, the Chinese and their sort of toadies in the Hong Kong government keep moving the goalposts back further and further. And the Hong Kong people are just tired of it. And the extradition bill is just one event of many. They've had other national security things. They regard these people as a menace. I mean, it's insane. If they treated Hong Kong with just a modicum of respect, they would have no problem.
In Congress, there's this Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act that was introduced by Congressman Chris Smith, supported by Speaker Pelosi. The bill would hold Hong Kong and Chinese officials accountable for their promises to protect the rights and freedom of the Hong Kong people, and then sanctions would be applied to those found in violation of the bill. Is this the best way for Congress to support the people of Hong Kong in this moment?
Well, it may be. I mean, I support if there's violence using the Magnitsky Act sanctions on individuals, for example, the head of police, Carrie Lam, and so forth. I do worry about certain provisions with trade. Like, what I don't want to do is punish the Hong Kong people further by making it harder for them to do business. Right now, if you're in Hong Kong, it's easier for you to do business with the U.S., better rates. What I would rather see is punish China, sanctions on Chinese officials that are responsible, maybe say no more students from China at our universities, but we're going to double the amount from Hong Kong and Taiwan. Those kind of things. Maybe ease up on the visa requirements. I think we want to treat the good parts of Hong Kong, you know, help them and hurt the communist government.
As the protests were escalating in Hong Kong this week, China, as you mentioned a moment ago, they were celebrating 70 years of founding the country's communist regime. On Tuesday, the White House and the State Department offered official best wishes from President Trump, who tweeted, "Congratulations to President Xi and the Chinese people on the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China." Now, what do you make of this tweet, Bill? Some said, look, this is just what a leader does. I took a darker view of that, frankly.
Yeah, it is sort of what leaders do. It is kind of the thing State Departments do. I wish that President Trump hadn't done it. And in fact, it drowns out in his address at the UN. He had quite a good section on Hong Kong, calling for China to honor its commitments and so forth. So I wish they hadn't done it, because the truth about October 1st is that it is a dark day in human history when the communists took over China. A lot of people forget all these Westerners were romanticized by Mao during his worst crimes. You know, he starved millions through the Great Leap Forward, and then the Cultural Revolution. Chinese people have just suffered incredibly, and Chinese Christians and Chinese Catholics have particularly suffered. All those people chucked into jail.
Horrible.
That was one of the worst days in human history, and so I don't like to see anyone commemorate it, even in a boilerplate kind of announcement.
Yeah. On Wednesday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was at the Vatican. He was part of a symposium called Pathways to Achieving Human Dignity. And it was a way to partner with faith-based organizations to achieve human dignity and freedom, religious freedoms in China. And he said this, listen.
When the state rules absolutely, moral norms are crushed completely. It's why China has put more than 1 million Uyghur Muslims like Mrs. Dawood, in internment camps. And it's why it throws Christian pastors in jail.
The human rights situation there, Bill, is abysmal at best. And last year alone, there was a rise in religious persecutions. What should the U.S. administration's posture be? Should they be working with that democracy movement in Hong Kong? Is there something else they can do here?
Yeah, I think they should work with all good parts of any society. Look, I applaud Secretary Pompeo for speaking out on this. It was excellent for him to raise the Uyghurs at the Vatican in Rome. I mean, the irony is that at the time the Secretary of State is raising religious persecution, the Vatican has made a god-awful deal with the Chinese communists that they're going to regret.
Yeah. I want to move ahead back to the home front, Bill. There is this impeachment movement underway here in Washington. They're hanging this, at least Nancy Pelosi and Schiff, who's head of the Intelligence Committee. They're really hanging their argument on this idea of the president pressuring a foreign power to, in their term, dig up dirt on his political opponent. Now, you have characterized this in your column this week as perpetual impeachment mode or permanent impeachment mode.
Right.
Where will this end? And do they have enough to hang an argument on here for impeachment?
Look, all you need to know about this impeachment inquiry, which Mrs. Pelosi announced, is that she announced it before she saw the transcript of the call and before she saw the complaint. So it's kind of like Lewis Carroll, what is it, the Queen of Hearts? Right. Verdict first, trial later.
Trial later.
That's what we have here. This is just a continuation of all the efforts to overturn the 2016 election. Where it goes, it's hard to say. I think that it will hurt the Democrats. I think it may even help Donald Trump. In other words, if he's not convicted, I think he'll probably be impeached in the House because the Democrats run it. Right. I don't see how he's going to be convicted in the Senate. I think it may make him stronger. That was kind of the lesson of Bill Clinton that they took. But so even though it may redound to the president's benefit, it's not something that any president wants, and it will hurt the nation to be so frivolous with such an awesome power.
Do you worry that in the wake of the 2 years of Mueller and that investigation, that the country can't go through any more of this? You know, we went through that whole drama. They found nothing there that could at least convict him of any criminal wrongdoing. Has that worn down the public appetite for this sort of move by the Democrats against a sitting president, or this one in particular?
I don't think the public ever had an appetite for this. I think this is by people that never recognized the 2016 elections. Look, the other thing is, if Donald Trump is such a monster and is guilty of all these things, it should be relatively easy for Democrats to get him voted out next year, right? I mean, just take your case to the American people.
Right.
But I think part of this is the disdain that Democrats have for the American people, especially for the Trump voters. And so, you know, instead of waiting for the election, let's just get a good candidate and defeat him, you know, through the ballot box. I think they're doing this because partly I think they're worried that they may not be able to defeat him at the ballot box. And that's why this effort, I don't think it's ever going to recede. And I think if Donald Trump wins re-election, it's going to continue for another 4 years. It's just, I think it's the nature of this presidency, and it's going to be the nature of the Democratic response. But if the Democrats lose seats, you know, they're worried about 31 seats that Democrats hold in districts that went for Trump. If they lose the House majority, I mean, it's possible that next year they're facing losing the House, the Republicans keeping the Senate, and the presidency. I mean, that would be Armageddon for them. And I don't think that they can help themselves.
Yeah. Bill McGurn's column, Main Street, appears every Tuesday in the Wall Street Journal, and it's always mandatory reading. Bill McGurn, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Raymond.
Thank you.